What if one of the biggest separations in our world, the one we draw between the spiritual and the material, the sacred and the everyday, wasn't a fundamental truth, but just a story we've been told? A story that has quietly shaped our societies, our thinking, and maybe even our own sense of who we are. For countless generations, especially within African spiritual traditions, that dividing line simply didn't exist. It was understood that everything is connected. In that way of seeing the world, the ancestors are always present. Nature is a sacred teacher, and the spiritual isn't something you do once a week. It's the air you breathe. There was a time when this knowledge was dismissed, labeled primitive, and pushed aside, but it was never buried. In this video, we're going to peel back some layers of historical misunderstanding to talk about the deep, holistic truth of African spirituality and see how its core ideas are showing up today to challenge and maybe even heal our fragmented world. To get to the truth, you first have to understand the fiction. The idea that our world is neatly split into two, the physical, material world, and a separate spiritual one, is a way of thinking that rose to dominance through Western thought and was spread worldwide during the colonial era. For the people arriving in Africa, it created a convenient ladder, rational and modern on the top rung, and superstitious and primitive on the bottom. This wasn't just a philosophical debate, it was an instrument of power. By dismissing indigenous worldviews as invalid, it justified disrupting ancient cultures and imposing outside belief systems. The holistic perspective, where life isn't split into neat little boxes, was profoundly misunderstood and suppressed. The problem for the colonizers wasn't that African societies had no religion. It was that life itself was religious, and every part of existence was filled with spirit. This created a deep cultural and spiritual disconnect that a lot of people still feel, without always knowing the reason why. For centuries, African spirituality was painted with a brush of mystery and fear, twisted by Hollywood cliches and colonial-era propaganda. Words like voodoo or juju became ugly caricatures used to portray the spiritual life of an entire continent as something dark or evil. But these stereotypes fall apart as soon as you look at them closely. One of the biggest myths is that these traditions are rigid, unchanging relics. The exact opposite is true. Unlike religions based on a single fixed book, most African spiritual traditions are oral and flexible. They are built to adapt, to absorb new ideas and evolve with the people who practice them. This is how they've survived and even thrived despite immense pressure. They weren't fossils waiting to be replaced. They were living, breathing ways of understanding the world. Another major misunderstanding is the phrase ancestor worship. In most traditions, that's a poor translation. Ancestors aren't worshipped like gods. They are venerated, honored, and respected as active members of the community who have simply passed into the spirit realm. They are the bridge between the human and the divine, offering wisdom, protection, and guidance. Ignoring them would be like ignoring your living grandparents. It breaks a sacred family bond and creates disharmony. The belief is that ancestors have a real interest in the well-being of their descendants. It's not a relationship of fear, but one of love, memory, and a connection that never breaks. So if African spirituality isn't what they told us, what is it? At its heart, it's a worldview of profound connection. First, there's the core idea of a holistic reality. The spiritual and the physical aren't two different worlds, but two sides of the same coin. Everything is filled with a vital life force, a spirit that connects all of existence. A sickness, for example, might be seen not just as a biological problem, but as an imbalance in a person's social or spiritual life, a tear in the fabric connecting them to their community and ancestors. Healing, then, has to be for the whole person, body, mind, and spirit, and for the community they're a part of. This leads right to the second principle, interconnectedness. This is probably best captured by the Southern African philosophy of Ubuntu. The phrase, Umuntu Ngumuntu Ngabantu, is often translated as, "I am because we are." My humanity isn't something I own by myself. It's tied up in your humanity. This idea puts community, compassion, and shared responsibility at the center of life. It's a stark contrast to the West's focus on the individual, arguing instead that a person is shaped and held up by their relationships with others. Ubuntu is the moral framework that holds a community together, recognizing that our well-being is tied to everyone else's. And finally, you have the ancestors, who act as the anchors of this connected web. They represent life's continuity, linking the past, the present, and the future. They are the guardians of a community's values. Honoring them is a way to stay rooted in your heritage and to draw strength from a line of people stretching back thousands of years. In a world that so often feels chaotic and rootless, this practice offers a deep sense of stability and belonging. A reminder that you are part of a story much, much bigger than your own life. The power of these ideas could never be contained on the African continent. They have shaped beliefs and practices all over the world in ways many of us don't even realize. During the transatlantic slave trade, enslaved Africans carried these worldviews with them. In the Americas and the Caribbean, these traditions adapted and survived, sometimes blending with elements of Christianity or indigenous beliefs. This gave birth to resilient diaspora religions like Vodou in Haiti, Candomblé in Brazil, and Santeria in Cuba. These are not corrupted versions. They are powerful examples of spiritual strength and creativity, preserving the holistic and communal heart of their African origins. You can also see this influence in global Christianity. The dynamic, music-filled worship styles and the strong emphasis on community that you find in many churches today, especially African independent churches, have deep roots in the continent's spiritual soil. And now, the wisdom of African spirituality is being seen as a vital resource for our modern world. The philosophy of Ubuntu is being studied for everything from conflict resolution to business management, offering a blueprint for building more compassionate societies. The holistic view of health is changing modern wellness, with more focus on community, spiritual balance, and natural remedies that have been used in Africa for centuries. This isn't some new fad. It's the modern world finally catching up with ancient wisdom. So why is this truth coming to light so strongly right now? Perhaps it's because we're living in the results of a divided worldview, a climate in crisis because we've separated ourselves from nature, societies struggling with loneliness because we're cut off from community, and individuals feeling a deep spiritual emptiness. Reconnecting with these principles isn't just an interesting idea, it's an act of healing. This process is often called decolonization. And it's not just about politics, it's about decolonizing our minds. It means asking hard questions about the stories we were told, stories that may have taught us to be ashamed of our own heritage, to see our ancestors' wisdom as somehow less than. For people of the African diaspora, it's a powerful journey of reclaiming identity and finding a source of strength that can heal historical wounds. It's about looking back to find the path forward and understanding that this wisdom isn't a museum piece, but a living guide for how to exist in a more balanced and whole way. This ancient way of seeing the world teaches us that we aren't isolated dots, but threads in a vast interconnected web of life. It reminds us that our ancestors walk with us, that nature is our classroom, and that our own well-being can't be separated from the well-being of our community. This is the truth that was pushed into the shadows, and it's the truth that holds the power to make us whole again. This journey of rediscovery belongs to all of us. What part of this holistic worldview resonates with you the most? Where have you felt that disconnect in your own life that we've talked about? The best conversations happen in the comments. Share your story, share your thoughts. Let's continue this talk and learn from each other. And if this message meant something to you, please like the video and subscribe to be part of our community. For centuries, a deep and whole way of seeing the world was pushed aside and misrepresented. The truth of African spirituality isn't about dark magic or superstition. but about a radical sense of connection, a shared responsibility, and a deep reverence for the unbroken chain of life that ties us to our ancestors and to the earth. What was hidden was a guide to a more integrated way of being. As we rediscover these principles, we aren't just learning about the past. We're being offered a chance at a more balanced future, one where the spiritual and material are brought back together, where community is our strength, and where we finally remember that we belong to each other and to the earth. This ancient wisdom has been waiting patiently. Now it's our turn to listen. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.